Hello everybody, and in today's video we are going to be making some hopped cider. Hopped cider is really easy to make. It's actually one of my most requested ciders from people that consume it. They'll consume the ciders I make. So hopped cider is also really easy. I'm going to be starting out with 4.5 gallons of Treetop 3 apple blend, and then 1/2 gallon of this UK cider blend. This is optional. The reason why I'm adding this is because I'm trying to get a little bit more apple character into it. Feel free to just use another 1/2 gallon of Treetop 3 apple blend, or just use 5 gallons of Treetop, just regular apple juice. I like Treetop's variety, or Treetop's apple blend, because I think it adds a nice little character to the cider, and it's something you can get easily in stores. Our hops addition that we're going to be adding in secondary are Citra hops. Citra is a citrus kind of forward hop, and I think that pairs really well with an extra little boost of citric acid that we're going to be giving this. So we're going to be adding into our primary 7 grams of citric acid. From what I've seen is that nice little citrus touch kind of backs up that citrus smell that you get from the Citra hops. In order to kind of clear up this cloudy juice, I'm going to be adding pectic enzyme. I'm going to be adding 20 grams of pectic enzyme. It's a lot of pectic enzyme. Pectic enzyme is not necessary if you are using all filtered juice. I've never seen a difference in any clarity or anything with filtered juice if you're using if you add pectic enzyme or you don't add pectic enzyme. They do that when they're filtering the juice, so you're not going to get any extra clarity difference. Yeast choice today, going to be Cephale T58. This is a spicy phenolic producing yeast. I'm basically just trying out this yeast with a couple of brews that I'm doing right now. The characteristics for phenolic components, they have a precursor acid, and that precursor acid produces peppery / spicy flavors. But it has to be fermented at a lower temperature than you would ferment something at. Usually kind of in the lager range, between 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So this will be fermenting outside. And living in the Pacific Northwest in the wintertime, that can be rather cold. So this is going to be a slower brew, slower ferment. Before we start adding juice though, I am going to go ahead and measure out 6 grams of ferment dough, 20 grams of pectic enzyme, and 7 grams of citric acid. Alright, 6 grams of that. Pectic enzyme, I'm going to use a tablespoon for. A tablespoon is roughly 20 grams if I remember correctly. So let me clear this out so it makes my math easier. Sorry, a tablespoon is roughly 10 grams. So I'm going to need a little bit more than a tablespoon. That is 15 and 20 grams of pectic enzyme. Put my pectic enzyme cap back on. Ferment cap. And now 7 grams of citric acid. I tried this with 10 grams of citric acid. It was a little bit much, so I'm bringing it down to 7 grams of citric acid. Although your personal acid preference might vary. So if you want to do 10, give it a go. I think the good range is anywhere between 5 and 10 grams. All right, got that all measured out. I'm going to add some hot water to this and mix it around. I have these really cute, tiny, what are these? Spatulas I'm mixing around with. I got them for Christmas a couple of years ago, and they're quite fun. So just gonna mix these around and kind of just get a nice good texture there. Hot ferment dough is one of the worst smelling things on the planet. Right, just set it aside, let it rehydrate a little bit. Now it's time to start adding things to our fermenter. In general, when you're adding things to your fermenter, I try to be a little bit turbulent with my additions, because I find that if you are turbulent with your additions, it makes it so that you need to not shake, because you're adding tons of oxygen when you're doing it. So nice and turbulent additions. You can actually see the color change of the juice while you're doing this if you're adding enough oxygen to it, which is kind of cool. right, so we got all of our juice inside of our fermenter here. And now it's just time to add our yeast and add our nutrient / pectic enzyme. I feel like I need to state this because I said I added hot water. When I'm saying hot water, it's like between 100 and 110 degrees. If you add too hot of water, degrees Fahrenheit. If you add too hot of water, you will denature your pectic enzyme. So don't do that. If you want to add really like boiling hot water to say your citric acid and your fermento, put your pectic enzyme in separately because you don't want to denature it. So anyway, adding our nutrient addition into here, right on top. Nutrient and acid addition. And then with our yeast, once again, Cephale T58. And we will go ahead and add that directly on top. Cephale says just sprinkle on top, so we're going to sprinkle on top. No need to do a starter for this one. Okay, that's it. We are going to be adding our airlock to this, putting the lid on it, and then putting it outside. It's been around 30 to 40 degrees, but that's outside temperature. Inside the garage is usually about 40 to 50, which is normal for this area for the winter time. And just going to let it sit for a few weeks, months, however long it feels like. After we get to the point where we want to add our dry hop addition, I'll go ahead and do another, we'll continue this video. So anyway, I'll see you in a bit. After the yeast was pitched, this sat around at around 40 to 50 degrees for 3 months inside of our garage. Following those 3 months, the hops were pitched for 2 days inside a hop bag and then removed, and the cider was allowed to clear for an additional month. The cider was then force carbonated to 2.5 atmospheres of pressure and allowed to sit for an additional 2 weeks. And now it is ready for tasting. Welcome back. It is time for the tasting video for our Citra hopped cider. And if you are not aware, I am changing over my scoring system to a new scoring system that is in line with the BJCP scoring system. It is out of 50, but I will normalize everything by reducing those numbers by a factor of 5. So whatever the final score is out of 50, I'll divide by 5, and that'll be my new scoring system. So the BJCP scoring system is 6 points for appearance, 10 points for bouquet and aroma, 24 points for flavor, and then 10 points for overall impression. And then that overall score is out of 50. So we're going to go ahead and give us a nice little pour out of our tap over here of our Citra cider. All right. This Citra cider is beautifully crystal clear. The carbonation about this is definitely petulant. It is on the low end of petulant, a few bubbles every second. So that'll definitely affect the overall acid content of this. So less carbonation dissolved is less acid. So that might just be it's well dissolved too. So we can also give that a go. It is a nice in between straw and amber. So it's kind of in between those two colors. Yeah, it's nice. Looking carbonation level is appropriate to what one would expect for this entry, and the clarity is near the brilliant side. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a 5.5 out of 6 on the appearance. Reason why I'm marking it down to half a point is because the carbonation level actually appears to be on the low side of petulant rather than the kind of middle side of petulant. So I'm going to mark it down for that if I were to submit it as petulant. All right, let's go ahead and give this a smell for our bouquet and aroma assessment. It's definitely Citra hops. I'm getting notes of grapefruit, definitely some vegetal quality to it, and a kind of a slight dankness. Its aroma is restrained, so I really have to get into the glass to smell it. You might have seen me accidentally touch my nose into it there. Yeah, it's kind of a restrained aroma. It's not really coming too much out of the glass. This is less than ideal serving temperature for cider. And what I mean by that is that cider is typically served between 50 and 60 degrees. I currently have my kegerator set to 38. So ideally, as it would warm up, the aroma would get more and more pronounced. So bouquet, I would say, I'm not getting any apple out of it though. I'm just getting Citra hops. So I'm just going to say a bouquet is no apple on the nose, all hops. So I'm going to go ahead and give the bouquet a 6 out of 10. Typically with cider, you want to have apple on the bouquet. And if you don't have apple, you're probably doing something wrong. Okay, let's go in for flavor. It's kind of coming up front with a kind of bitter note. Overall sweetness impression is semi-dry. I don't remember what I actually back sweetened this to now, but now that I'm tasting it, but it is definitely semi-dry. Not getting any real alcohol presence to it, which is good for a low ABV cider. I think this one's 6.5%. So no real alcohol presence noted on it. I definitely get apple on the taste. Apple and kind of a little bit of an oily, hoppy flavor. I wouldn't say it's oily to a fault, like not like mucusy or ropey, but definitely get a little bit of an oily presence to it on the tongue. Going around the palate, it's actually not as acidic as I would expect it to be. I believe I added citric acid to this, and it doesn't really have that like sharp acid hit. It's definitely a slightly acidic, but the acid's actually pretty nicely in balance with everything else. I do get that kind of heat now after taking a couple of sips, so I'm getting a slight alcohol heat on the taste, but the main flavor is kind of bitter. The tannin is very present in this, and it's kind of going more towards the with the hops as an addition. It kind of balances more towards the bitter side of things, but it does have nice apple notes to it, so that's kind of making it a little bit difficult to evaluate. Not terribly acidic. It is slightly fruity, and it is slightly floral. With all those in consideration, I would say this actually relatively well balanced of a cider, with the exception of the bitter aftertaste. So I'm going to give it 12 points for that. And the ingredients as appropriate. The hops themselves are just a little bit too much. So I'm going to mark it off 2 points for that, to give it 3 total points. And then aftertaste, all you're getting is bitter aftertaste. The bitterness really lingers. And if you like bitterness, that is something that it's kind of subjective. So I'm going to give it also a 3. So 6 and 12 give this an 18 out of 24. Overall impression. It's a nice, beautiful cider to look at. The carbonation level is appropriate for the amount of sweetness. The bitterness, though, from the tannins that were added and the hops presumably added some slight amount of bitterness, even though they weren't cooked. I would say that this is definitely something where the hops are taking over the drink. So objectively, this, while it is a nice balanced the cider underneath it is balanced, just too much hops. The pitch of this hops needed to be down, or the amount of time it sat on hops needed to be reduced. The hops note, in my opinion, to have a more balanced cider should be less. So I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10 on overall impression. And I'm just going to write too much hops. Okay. I would say this is still too style for a botanical cider. It's just too much in the hop side. So this leads me to 12, 30, 35.5 out of 50. And that would be a 7.2. Oh, sorry, 7.2, 7.1. So 7.1 out of 10 is my final score. I like the addition of hops to cider sometimes, but you have to be really careful. Cider notes are very delicate, and as soon as you start to add kind of strong flavors such as hops, they can just make the cider taste like hops. I think what I'm going to do for this one next time is reduce my pitching rate to a half an ounce rather than an ounce, and make sure I use more fresh hops. That kind of dank note, I think, was due to the fact that these sat inside my fridge for like 6 months. Even though they were vacuum sealed, I don't know if that affects the quality of the hops. They were Citra cryo hops from Yakima Valley hops, or Yakima Chief, I think is what the name of the hops brand is. Yeah, they are. I don't necessarily know if they're vacuum sealed and it's just kept fresh for that long, but it might be a combination of that, or maybe some slight oxidization that occurred to make it that little bit of dank note. I'm not really seeing any oxidization in the color at all, and I'm not tasting the dank note that I'm smelling, but it is definitely present on the nose, which is it detracts from the overall cider experience. It's okay. It's not. There's nothing technically wrong with it. It's still to style, but it's just not a great example of the style. And that's my final evaluation of this. This definitely needs improvement. We'll get there on this, but it's drinkable. It's fine. I think that it's too hoppy. So it kind of detracts from the cider itself. It had that hoppiness. I like the underlying cider though, so I might see if I can play with that a little bit. I think I added some bittersweet concentrate to this, and that makes it so it's nice and it feels like a nice pleasant cider underneath. But it's just, the hoppiness is just overwhelming the other flavors in it, which is not great. So anyway, that's it for my evaluation. Cheers and happy cidering.